All right, well, thank you for joining. Good afternoon and welcome to the kickoff of the first ever creator track at Streaming Media. A brief note, unfortunately, Flores Bauer fell ill, so he is not joining us, but in his stead, we have Rashaun Hall of Fuse Media, so thank you for graciously stepping in as number 3 for our panelists. I'd also like to thank Alan McLennan and the Streaming Media team for inviting me to moderate this panel. I'm Craig German, and I've been in the traditional part of the industry, studios and big post facilities for most of the past 30 years. As a board member of the Hollywood Professional Association for the past 9 years, I've witnessed firsthand how rapidly our conversations, topics, and membership have shifted to include the creator economy. Our topic today is competing with social platforms in the short form space. And we'll talk about what the traditional channels can do to participate in this new creator universe. How can the big studios and streaming platforms coexist and thrive in a world of TikToks and YouTubes? One of the bigger headlines last year, of course, was YouTube's ascension over Netflix to number 1 in the US television viewership, and they're continuing to grow that number, which now stands at 12.5%. And it should have come as no surprise that when Kimmel returned to the air 2 weeks ago, his 26 million social views handily get 6 million broadcast views. So in a moment, we'll get to hear our panelists, who are all category leaders in the creator space, share their secrets to success and what advice they give to the traditionals. So to my left is Kasey Esser, whom you may recognize from various articles in the trades as one of the top writer, producer, actors in the booming world of vertical dramas. Or maybe he's your favorite vampire from one of his recent series, My Vampire Bodyguard. We have Rashaun Hall next to him, VP of Streaming and Partnerships at Fuse Media, a Latino-owned global entertainment company that has 7 fast channels and Fuse Plus, an SVOD channel targeting diverse young adults. And finally, on the end there, we have Mr. David Williams, SVP and General Manager of Channels at Pocket.watch, the largest independent kids streaming service. So the way we're going to run this, the first 2 questions for our panel will just be more general, and our panelists can chime in however they wish, or else I'll force them to answer. But the next 3 questions will be specific to each of them in their particular focus. And after that, I'll ask one final wrap-up prompt before we close. So we will get started. All right, first one here, as I said, is for all of you. What are the traditional channels, broadcast, cable, and studios, what are they missing that the creators and short-form producers get? So what are they not doing right that you guys understand?
I guess I'll start. I think what I had to help our team evolve with when I started, I was in audience development at Fuse. What I had to help the team understand is that social is just not a marketing channel. It's a place for original content. So it's not about just saying, hey, go watch this series on our SVOD service and a link to the SVOD service. Yes, do some of that, absolutely. But you want to engage and entertain and build models and build that community of loyal followers who then hopefully you get down the funnel to subscribe. But first and foremost, why do they want to follow you? Why do they want to consistently engage with that content? So figuring out original content that is native to that platform, whether it's vertical with TikTok or Instagram Reels, etc., or if it's even X Threads, whatever, making sure that content speaks to that platform and that audience in a specific way is, I think, something that a lot of the major studios are starting to get. You're starting to see different ways that they're taking their talent and filling them into spots beyond just putting the trailer up and doing some BTS and doing some more interesting things or following some of the typical trends that you see on social that other creators are doing. But I think it's, that is the thing, understanding that those platforms are not just for promotion.
Right, so it's more of a fuller experience that they should be exploiting and also integrated back and forth between the different channels.
Otherwise, it just looks like an ad. So why would anytime I see something sponsored, I'm swiping through it unless it catches my attention. So yeah, you want to be able to engage with that platform or engage with that content naturally like you do any other creative content.
Yeah. David, do you want to say?
Yeah, well, what I would add is that, first of all, just as a baseline, YouTube and social in general, we focus mainly on YouTube. This is the most competitive Darwinian content ecosystem the world has ever seen. And the creators who emerge at the top of this ecosystem are truly apex predators. They emerge not because of some fluke or some algorithmic hack. They emerge because they have found magic with an audience and developed a discipline for serving that audience over and over. And I think, and so we're partnered, for example, with over 60 of the biggest creators in especially the kids and family space, reaching 10 billion views a month on YouTube just by itself. And I think what the traditional outlets miss is that in this incredible competitive ecosystem, the creators are empowered with immense data in near real time. And by the way, they are rewarded for their success in very almost near real time. Like they get paid monthly. And so this is an incredible dynamic that makes them responsive to an audience on a level that content creators haven't really seen before. And I think the competition and the empowerment that the platform provides creates this dynamic that forces them to be so incredibly responsive. And that doesn't really exist outside of these ecosystems.
Right. It's like a producer-distributor type feedback loop, really, right?
It is the tightest feedback loop. And so to the extent that traditional studios and networks can institute some of the similar dynamics, that's what's going to kind of lay the road to their success.
Yeah. Kasey? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you who don't know, like the vertical space, they're basically soap operas that are broken up into 60 to 90 second episodes, and they're designed to really hook you. And I remember I was speaking with a producer last year, and, the content tends to get, made fun of, right? Because it's usually a billionaire saving a damsel in distress. Typically his crazy ex comes in. There's also an equally as crazy male villain. And, they get, lambasted online. But the unique part of that is this is all data-based, meaning they polled the audience and the audience said, this is what we want. And that's why they're succeeding. And I remember I was speaking with that producer and saying, well, what about like this idea and this idea? And he stopped me and he was like, Kasey, we don't make things that we want to see. We make things the audience wants to see. And that always stuck with me because it's common sense, right? You make what the audience wants to see, and that's how you make your money. But from what I've seen, traditional channels don't really focus on that as prominently. So the vertical dramas are all about, based on their data, the people want to see aspirational romance with high stakes. They want to see a love story because love translates across every culture and every language. So, that's something that they really hit on, and it's working.
It's great insights, as I would expect. So here, now that you've thought through a little bit about what they're missing, what one thing do you think a traditional studio could do or should do today to make that big shift to transform their business, assuming there is something like that? And what does success look like in that picture?
Well, I guess I have a couple answers to this. One is, I don't want to give them our secret sauce, but we partner with creators because they've proven their success with audiences. So we are highly de-risked versus sort of a traditional model where we're, creating a brand or creating a new property from scratch or even a spin-off. It's not the same as partnering with a creator who knows the content that's resonating with their audience. So I think partnerships like that are one key pathway. Another I would say is just, the world of content is becoming more cluttered and fragmented than ever before. There are waves of change roaring over the landscape. Change is great, right? It opens up opportunities for a lot of people. But I think in this new level of competition, creating IP that resonates with meaning and relevancy is going to be a really important currency. Making that IP proliferate and become almost ubiquitous because as some of us are seeing with Sora 2 and some of these Gen AI things, right? The integration of iconic IP across the landscape, whether it's some of those new AI apps or whether it's Roblox and video games, the dissemination of IP and mobilizing fans and extracting the value. Like those are the core things I think that need to be focused on.
All right. I hope they're listening.
Yeah, I'd agree with the collaboration with creators. Yeah, we recently teamed with Kev on Stage, who's a comedian who actually has 2 shows on BT Plus now. He had an SVOD service. He was a little ahead of his time. It wasn't sustainable. He shuttered the service. We partnered with him and licensed his content, and they now have some first look deals with him to bring in that content and his audience by proxy, which is 2 million plus on social, to our platform. And I think it's doing that kind of collaboration, but keeping that creator authentic to who they are, not taking that creator and trying to put them in a comedy or something else. Let them do what it is that they do naturally and let them speak authentically about it. And I think the other thing is that point of data. Like, understand who your audience is. Don't assume. Don't make those decisions. Look at your demographics. Look at the information you do have, and making sure that you're not saying, okay, this is the audience I think I want, so let me go here. So if your audience is 35 plus, but you want the 24-year-old, but you have a 35 plus audience, that's the audience you need to cater to.
Right. That's fantastic. I definitely, it's hard to see though. You do have obviously, like when I was at Amazon Studios. There were all-in deals with certain talent where they were there to nurture that talent, but they made the mistake you're talking about. They said, "Great, you're a comedian. Want to make some, this kind of drama?" And some of it worked, but mostly not. All right. Well, I'm going to jump on to a question specifically for Kasey. All right. So you're one of the most prominent vertical drama trailblazers, and you're writing, producing, and often acting in them. And many in the industry think back on the failure of Quibi when they hear vertical drama, so they're skeptical even though the numbers speak for themselves. You've got China, South Korea, now the US, and globally verticals are spreading, and it's a $14 billion market potential by 2027. And just your audience alone has accounted for over 500 million views. So why have verticals suddenly become so huge, and where do they fit in the overall content landscape? And I know from our conversation a couple of weeks ago, what is that opportunity? What does that vertical drama opportunity look like for this audience, or the people at this conference?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to keep in mind with the verticals is it's simply another medium of storytelling. This is something that should be viewed as a complement to studios' core businesses versus something that's a threat to movies or TV, because it's not a replacement. It's just, this is another avenue for stories and audience. That being said, there's 200,000 movie theaters around the world. There's almost 2 billion TVs. There are roughly 7 billion smartphones. So the first piece of a vertical's success is that they met people where they were, on their phones. And then secondly, we all live multitasking lives, right? We have a lot of things to do, and we rarely get, sadly, 30 to 60 minutes consecutive to watch a movie or a TV show. So the verticals are broken up into 60 to 90 second episodes. So you can watch an episode, you can go change your kid's diaper, you can go back, watch another episode, go get your kid a snack, watch another episode, and so on. And it feels, very congruent with life versus, oh shoot, I have to pause my TV show or pause my movie. That feels like more of a pattern interrupt versus the verticals kind of give you a clean break to continue. So they're not only congruent, with your hand, but they're congruent with your life. And then, in terms of Quibi, because that does get, brought up quite a bit as a point of skepticism, there are a few huge differences. First one being, Quibi didn't have a genre. It was general. Verticals, they are soap operas, they are romance, and they are shameless about that. And romance is the #1 genre in the world, and it'll be the #1 genre long after we're gone. And the verticals just go all in on that, mainly because it's global. As I mentioned earlier, a love story is a love story, no matter what language you speak. Second, Quibi didn't focus on what would engage people on the phone. You know, there weren't cliffhangers, there wasn't really crazy drama. They would basically do what they would do in like a art type movie and just do it on the phone. But when you're on the phone, you got a lot more competing for your attention than when you're in a theater just sitting locked into a screen. So that didn't keep people. And what has been found with the verticals is that all of that can outweigh star power. You know, people didn't necessarily want to see A-list stars on their phone because they were already seeing them on the big screen. So it sort of felt like a downgrade. Whereas, you know, plucking someone, you know, pretty obscure like myself and then putting him in there, you know, going around like calling myself an alpha werewolf, you're curious because you're like, who is this? How did they give him this job? You know, what is going on here? You know, there's no prior knowledge of who, you know, I was or any of these people in the space, you know, were. And then third, Quibi's budgets were just the same as normal movies and TV. They were really expensive to make. Verticals, you know, I've produced 3. They've all been between $100,000 and $150,000. And, you know, these are the length of a feature. They're 60 to 70 minutes. So you think about that and you're like, wow, this is, you know, Quibi was spending, you know, $1 million, you know, for an episode. And I could do 8 to 10 verticals with that amount of money and get a bigger audience and get a return. That's crazy. And that's, you know, where the opportunity exists for any of you who want to write, direct, produce, you know, act in a vertical is you get to make things and you get to have fun because, you know, we shoot them in a week, you know, 6 to 7 days, usually 10 pages a day. Pre-production is 3 to 4 weeks. Shooting's the 1 week. Post is 3 to 6 weeks. Then it's out and it's getting seen by millions of people. So the conversations that I have now with traditional Hollywood, because now there are so many who are getting into the space and they see the opportunity and they see the point of evolution, is they just want to have fun again and they want to make things. They're like, we miss the Hollywood where, you know, we were just partying, telling stories, and, you know, things were growing. You know, they're tired of managing decline. You know, they want to manage growth, and that's what the vertical space has in spades.
So the economics obviously were imbalanced in prior tries, but now with them sort of figured out, people can really experiment and accelerate their, like what they tried. I think you were telling me about some of the things that people try that don't work, and they can easily kill them really quickly, and it's not like a painful loss necessarily because they didn't invest $1 million or whatever. But also it's interesting you're saying, so if I heard you correctly, the studios should look at this really, or any other bigger producers, as an augmentation of their business opportunities, not something that's going to cannibalize necessarily because of the way it's consumed differently. So looking at it that way as an add-on or maybe a complementary interplay with other kinds of properties, that seems like a more proper way to look at it.
Yeah, because verticals are not, you know, movies in the traditional sense. They're built, you know, for that audience and for that kind of pacing. In a vertical, there's no exposition. You're in the story. You know, you get maybe 1 or 2 lines and then we're going. Usually I'm proposing marriage to someone by like episode 2. And, you know, then we're off to the races and I find out I have a kid and, you know, there's no backstory needed. You know, it's you know, we're just along for the ride. Whereas, you know, if you were in a movie, you'd be like, wait, I need logic. You don't need logic in verticals to an extent.
That's now I'm gonna have to go watch some more. All right, well, thank you. That was a great intro for those of you who haven't tried it. For those of you who haven't, actually, so what are some good channels to try out just to get more familiar with what's out there in the vertical space?
Yeah, Real Short is the biggest one. Some of you may have heard of that one. That was the first one that I did with them. Drama Box is a big one. Yeah, just search my name and just find all of mine. You'll have fun.
Yeah, and it was an eye opener, and at first I was like, oh, and there is a lot. I'm sure you would agree. There's a lot that's because it's a lower bar to make it. There is a lot of other stuff that's maybe repetitive or not so great, but there's also these like really compelling stories, which is why people watch them, and they just eat them. They eat them up.
Yeah, and the next one I go to space, and when I come back, like my family's in disarray, and she's like, "You're always on your rocket," and I'm like, "I went on my rocket one time," and the title is like, "After Rocketing, Husband Returns." You know, it's very like, you know, it doesn't. It spoils it.
It does happen when you go to space like that. I found.
Yeah, I didn't tell her I was going.
Terrible. All right, well, thank you very much. I'm going to move to David next. So you've been a leading digital media entrepreneur for over 25 years, and roughly the last 10 at pocket.watch, where you partner, as you said, you partner with and empower creators of kids content, leading kids content. And your demo is particularly rich in terms of the potential for an integrated brand strategy, which we were talking about earlier, across TV, small screen, games, consumer products, everything, right? And when we spoke last week, you talked about pocket.watch emphasizing expansion into new lines of business where you find new opportunities. So what are some of the latest areas that pocket.watch is pushing into, and what kind of challenges are you facing, and how do you retain brand loyalty in the face of a zero attention span audience?
Yeah, great question. No, we are really excited about some of the areas we're expanding into, and we really did pioneer this space of essentially growing YouTube stars into multi-platform businesses with billion-dollar lines of products at retail around the world and video games and all those types of different experiences. And we work with a portfolio of over 60 now. And what's one of the interesting things that we're moving into is we're growing our audience. So Generation Alpha is kind of identified as this audience that was born in 2010. I've got 2 of them in my house. They are different, and they're, next year they're going to start driving. And so they're going to be the biggest generation in history. They currently have $100 billion in purchasing power, and they influence 40% of household purchases. And anyone who's got Gen Alphas in your house probably know this, because it's sort of like, why do I even need to be consulted on the decision of like which TV to buy or which car to buy? The kids are going to make up their minds. I might get a veto. And now we are starting to see their tastes mature, right? We started with these kids and family creators who really serve kind of this 3 to 11 age demo. And so now we're starting to serve them as teens, and we're doing it with new shows and new ways of working with our partners across the distribution landscape. We distribute to over 40 platforms around the world, including, and I think we're kind of the only ones who distribute at scale to some of the super premium platforms, like bringing YouTube content to places like Hulu and Hulu with Disney Plus, Peacock, etc., bringing that content. And so something we've done along those lines recently that combines kind of getting into new audiences and, or rather getting into older audiences and working with these platforms is something called Creators Collection. So one of the things these platforms love about us is that we help them retain viewers, right? Like instead of their viewers leaving to go to YouTube to watch their favorite creators, they can stay on Hulu or Peacock or Amazon or Roku Channel. And Disney Plus recently realized, with our help, that when they release a new property, a new movie, or a new TV show, one of the things that happens is that fervent, passionate fan base wants more of the content. So maybe they saw the Lilo and Stitch movie premiere on Disney Plus, and they want more. Well, where did they go for more? They go to YouTube. I don't know if you guys have had this experience, but you get really into a show or a movie and then you go to YouTube. I think I watched 3 times as much Severance content on YouTube than I did on Apple TV Plus. And so we've created this new product called Creators Collection, launched on Disney Plus, where we bring the best of the content related to that property to the platform. And we have a whole process. We like to say curate, cure, enrich, and package, where we essentially transform that YouTube content into content suitable for Disney Plus and the big screen. And now we're leveraging that process into things like Creators Collection to help them extend those viewing sessions within their platforms. So those are a couple of really exciting areas for us. The new shows for the older audiences and things like extending IP experiences on premium platforms.
Was that an obvious, no, I shouldn't say obvious. Was that a jump that sort of organically came out of your data, you were saying like, oh my gosh, this is what we should definitely be doing?
Well, we knew that this was our appeal to these platforms. That our appeal is, the content performs. So when it performs on YouTube, we bring it to these platforms. We know it's going to perform. We know the level to which it's going to perform, and we can bring it to them very economically. And so, I will put our content against any premium content any day of the week, and I think we're going to probably outpace it in terms of engagement, and we will definitely outpace it in terms of the cost to the platform on a per hour of viewing basis, right? Like, we are much more efficient when they spend $1 on our content in terms of keeping their viewers. And so we knew that this was kind of a big feature for our company and how we relate to these partners. And so we saw that was especially in light of the stat that you quoted, which actually it's now 13% of the TV that YouTube owns versus I think Netflix is 8.5%. And the rest are kind of behind that. So we knew that they were in this kind of mortal battle with YouTube, looking to retain those viewers, and then we saw opportunities to help them by bringing content related to those fan bases that would please those specific fan bases.
So that's like when we were saying earlier, what is a solution? That's a great solution with partnering back with the studios to help them with your expertise and how you can actually, like you said, keep people on their platform.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that is an education for all of us. I'm moving on to Rashaun with the final individual question. So it's been a double-edged sword to have unprecedented insight into social and streaming viewer behaviors. On the one hand, we at least pay lip service to caring about privacy. But on the other hand, content user experiences can be precisely targeted and therefore far more relevant, as we know. In one of my conversations with Flores last week before he became sick, excuse me, he had a way of describing what he was doing with performance data as deconstructing creativity. And he uses his performance data to optimize content for distribution. So tell us how Fuse analyzes their data to feed into how they make their content, how they market it, and how they distribute it. And how could your fellow producer distributors adopt this approach most successfully?
Yeah, I think targeting a young, diverse audience is important for us. But we want to know what it is that they like. So again, we can assume that they are going to want a certain type of content, but our demographics and our data will tell us what's really working. So for our SVOD service, we see that there are certain series that work really well. We have a sexual health and wellness unscripted series called Sex Sells. Does really well on our service. So as we started to license other content, we found out that literally anything that had sex in the title performed really well.
That's a good discovery.
Right, exactly. Shocking discovery that sex literally sells. So for us, so it was like, okay, we can lean into that. But at some point, you're like, all right, there still needs to be some curation that balances that. We're not a sexual education service. So it is a bit of a balance between what we know works and then finding other things that complement it, that fit into that ecosystem. And that speak to that content to then find similar things. I think the other part of that is, again, with in terms of the creator, okay, we see that this creator, this talent works really well. So part of the reason Sex Sells works is because our host, Wheezy, who is a podcaster, is a really charismatic person. So how do we find other ways to get her into other types of content to create a Wheezy verse? Or we work with Big Frida. How do we create a Big Frida? But how do we start to find other types of content that we can put them in, that we can create with them, whether it's social, short form or long form, that continues to have some sort of thread where you come to this platform for all things of this creator that you're interested in. So I think it is about that and finding that partnership, where the partnership becomes much more than just, oh, this is show talent. No, we want this to be a partnership, and how do we get into business with these creators holistically, similar to what pocket.watch does. It's like, how do we find other ways for you to make revenue that is mutually beneficial for us? So if you're in the podcasting space, is there an opportunity for us to do something there? Or, you have another venture or business that you are looking to get into. If we can support you, and if we can figure out a way that our businesses can align, then that's what we should do to figure out that broader partnership. Because again, that creator is what's leading. These creators are what's leading, that charge and bringing their audiences in. I think gone are the days, obviously, of brands or studios or MTV is not what it is anymore. People are watching a creator, and they may go to MTV because that creator is going to be on there, but they're not coming to any of those platforms for the brand. That is the brand. They're coming for the person or the talent that they're interested in.
Right. So, and do you see with the reading the tea leaves of your data that what was true 3 months ago that you were acting on is changing rapidly, or are you able to sort of find a stable point, get used to it, and act in accordance with that data, and then it changes in like a year, or the macro ones and the micro?
Yeah, I think it typically holds steady. I think we'll see that there has to be enough creativity and flexibility in changing of content in the fast pace, which is slightly different from vertical. Is you have to be aware that, okay, your catalog is your catalog, but you need to refresh that catalog, otherwise your audience is going to churn out. Same thing with S5. It's like you have to keep doing something to maintain that audience, and then figuring out what those things are. I think the other thing is that we are getting better at is sticking to something. If we're going to invest in content, whether it's short form, long form, whatever, it's okay, we're going to stick to that for a certain level of time, because you have to train that audience to be coming to you for that content. You can't do one season of something and assume that, okay, we can come back in a year and a half and do season 2. Like, you have to churn to the point. You have to churn that content out. I think it's obviously another way that vertical video works great is that, if they're churning out content to a point where, you're constantly getting something new, and that refresh is important.
Yeah. Well, great. That's a good illustration, because I think a lot of times you hear about people saying, well, yeah, we take all this data, we've got access, we act on it. You're like, how? Like, what? Tell me something. That was great to get some of those examples. It was very helpful. All right, so in the final minutes of this talk, I have something I'm going to ask each of our panelists, and so maybe take a couple of sentences, 2 or 3, to help us know what you're thinking about here. What company, technology, or creator, other than the 3 of you and Floris, should we be watching for the next big thing in this space, and why? And I'm going to start with Kasey. Bless you.
Well, I hate to say this, but no, you have to watch me, because in this space, in all seriousness, there's not a lot of people producing original stories. So, I recently produced one on Spec. It's an action adventure series. It's a little bit outside the norm of the typical vertical soap opera, but up to now, that Spec model has not been tested. So if it works, if we can make this and then sell it for a lot of money to various platforms, that's going to open up a whole new window of creators coming in to make vertical narrative content and then shopping it to vertical platforms, much like the indie film model. Because right now, the platforms are hiring production companies and financing the productions themselves, but there wasn't really anything of like someone making one and then inverting it and saying, well, now I own the content and you have to buy it. So that's going to be something to watch out for in the next 3 to 6 months. So yeah, keep an eye on that, and then anyone else who follows, good luck to them.
Watch this space. All right, I'm going to move and ask David.
Sure. All right. I'm going to give a quick plug on something new that we're doing, which is a show with a creator named Mackenzie Turner, who started as a streamer, and now she's got this kind of adventure drama with her. It would probably work as a vertical, called The Besties, and it premieres on Hulu next month, and it's a good example of how we're kind of getting into those new audiences, and it's really fun content. The other thing I'm going to say is Streamberry. Streamberry. Do you guys know Streamberry? Nobody watches Black Mirror?
Oh.
There you go. So Streamberry is like a personalized streaming service. And I bring it up because, look, there's obviously, we talked about waves of change coming through these businesses. And one of them is AI-generated content. And Streamberry kind of is, the fictional apotheosis of that, in that it shows you, it's kind of the Black Mirror version of Netflix that shows you personalized shows, like with you in them, maybe played by Selma Hayek, I think, in the Black Mirror episode. This stuff is coming. This AI generated content, which we're doing a lot with, and we're doing it, I think, in a way that's very artisanal and thoughtful, and with art. It is coming, and it's going to lead to a lot of kind of personalized creative experiences, creative content experiences, and so keep keep an eye out for that.
Streamberry.
Streamberry.
And so is Pocket Watch partnered with Streamberry?
Streamberry is, to be clear, it's a fictional.
Oh,
it's a
sorry,
fictional streaming platform in the Black Mirror universe.
Oh, okay, God, I gotta catch up on my Black
But it's coming, and yes, we are working towards being ready for it.
And sorry, I gotta ask, because you were mentioning, obviously AI could be a completely different conversation here, but in terms of IP ownership, do you have a way to, oops, that's right. Do you, where have you figured out that line to your satisfaction at Pocket Watch for where you can use AI to be involved in creating content?
Yeah, we actually have a number of initiatives underway along those lines. We're partnering with creators to leverage some of the expertise that we've actually developed in our studio to leverage these technologies to create new characters and experiences and content formats and stuff. And there'll be some big news on that in the coming months. And then we're also using it to develop some of the content that we're producing and distributing right now. So there's a lot, and we've got in-house tools that are helping on the back end. In terms of the monetization, I think this is kind of a global problem. It's a slippery slope. It sweeps across all sectors, and I actually think we kind of need a global approach to dealing with it, but it will certainly, I think, involve the compensation of a broad base of creators.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not going to be, I think the stance of not having copyrightable material where AI is involved to some extent, we've seen it obviously start, the milestone's been moving, goalpost has been moving, but it's not done yet. Okay, Rashaun, what's your thought here?
I think for me it's a genre. It's comedy. Because comedy is like the vertical genre. The comedy is a thing I have discovered. I don't know how many comics on TikTok or YouTube shorts or reels, etc. just from seeing one bit. They take that one joke and then you want to find more. So I may subscribe to their YouTube channel. I may seek out their special, on YouTube or wherever it may be streaming. So I think that the comedy genre, particularly the other thing is I can't for the life of me remember this guy's name. He plays a character named Terry, and he has an Office-esque, almost like a sitcom, that is done in 60-second clips on TikTok. And it had a full narrative. They've had guest stars, actually working well-known actors kind of be in the series, kind of come in and out. And it's an evolution of, again, it felt like micro sitcom content, whereas similarly I know most people who still watch SNL either watch it via TikTok or social or YouTube, and that way they can fast forward through the skits that they don't like. So I think that there is a real universe in which the age of the traditional sitcom is no longer, or doesn't do as well as it typically does because of those attention spans. But I think it's looking at comedy in that bite-sized way allows you to, it translates, and then you may, I've even gone to see comics live because I discovered them on TikTok and have enjoyed them enough that I wanted to invest my money in going to see them live.
Yeah, it does seem like, and it's comedy of so many different sorts, of course, that appeal to niche audiences. But I'm always blown away that there's so many comics, and I watch them in my Facebook feed, which is sort of embarrassing. But I look and I think, oh my God, how did I not hear of this person? Yet I'm hooked on that one and that one and that one and that one. So yeah, I think it's definitely opening up as the genre of comedy has found a mechanism for discovery. I think we're coming up to the end here, and we've heard I think we've heard some really helpful advice for the big guys from some experts here. So one thing I think that it sounds like the studios really need to understand is how do they get that data and listen to that data. Another one is how do they really leverage their social channels and actually all of their channels so that they're not just narrow scoped on how, like you said, social is just for promos and stuff like that. Another one is don't try to invent the entry into this space, but partner with the people who are actually showing with real numbers, like what Kasey's got and what we see at Pocket Watch and other creators, where they actually have a success in a particular area and just let them do it and benefit from that. And also it does sound like there's a mechanism for studios, if they're smart, to be able to have that feedback with partnerships like with these companies here to keep their customers watching on their platform. But they need to partner with people who have developed that expertise. Very helpful advice. Anything else anybody wants to make sure they say before we say adieu?
It's a great summation.
Thanks. I listened. Any questions? I think we have 2 minutes, so yes, please.
Do you feel as though you each have a competitive edge over studios that have had to traditionally stay within a format that worked with them and now no longer works? So you were able to do kids content and specialize on that.
Right.
Fuse has a specific frame within the Latin America landscape, and then you have like a specific audience you're speaking to, where studios have had to kind of tell people what to do and hope that they follow along, and you've been able to say, actually, we're going to do the opposite and make money off of it, and you were able to grab these small individual markets that studios can't necessarily focus on all at once.
I think just you've kind of put your finger on something, which is that just being small and nimble is a big part of it. You know, everything that Disney does is just an example. They have more to lose than gain. You know, we almost have nothing but upside in a sense. When I was at Maker Studios, which Disney bought, there was like this dream that we were going to, at that point in time, convert these YouTube stars and their enthusiastic fan bases into the new franchises. Disney can barely do franchises with its own TV properties. How is it going to do with YouTube channels? You know, they've got Marvel and Pixar and Lucasfilm and plenty on their plate to do franchises around. And it takes a whole company to do that. So just being small and nimble is a huge advantage.
I also think to kind of give a plug, I'm on another panel later about niche audiences, and it is focusing, as you said, on that audience that you know you can speak to well. And at the end of the day, if you speak to them enough and authentically and effectively, that can grow into broader audience, because they, you know, everyone is not a monolith. So I'm black, but I have Latino friends, I have LGBTQIA friends, and if I say, oh, I really like this show, even if it's not a show that is focused on you or puts, you know, that ethnicity or that demographic in the spotlight, if it's good content, they will share that. And then there's that intersectionality that then amplifies that content out. So it is understanding that niche and being true to it, and then, leaning in on it.
Yeah, a common conversation that comes up on set is like, you know, when is, you know, Hulu is going to get into space, like Netflix is going to get into space and all these things, and, you know, it's going to be great. And, you know, my thought was always, why would we wait for that? I don't need Netflix. I don't need Hulu. Like, this is happening all outside of the traditional system. You know, I'm non-union. I don't have representation, and I'm able to do really whatever I want to do. And it's going to be a whole different model that you're going to see. That's going to be a transformative shift in who the gatekeepers, for lack of a better term, are.
I think we're supposed to leave. Do we have to leave right now? If we don't, you had a question next, I think. Yes.
Okay, how do you take your content and leverage it to get distribution if you're an independent content creator and you haven't built a real big following on any of the big social media platforms, and you have like a docuseries or a short format content series that you want to distribute? What would you recommend to get distribution?
Actually, Kasey, I think you have with the vertical distribution channels.
Yeah, you said you had a docuseries?
I have a friend that's doing a docuseries on the safety teams of the safety teams that risk their lives to save lives of the surfers that surf the 60-foot waves at Maui, Hawaii, and Jaws. And they're trying their best to get distribution right now, and nobody will really entertain the conversation with them because they don't have a huge following, and what the studios are saying, go get a sponsor. And then they'll know that money's attached, so that's where I was helping them. But it's almost been impossible. They had Discovery and possibly a couple other channels, but because they didn't bring a sponsor to the table, they weren't interested in getting distribution.
Well, now, I mean, I'm not as experienced in that, but there are so many vertical platforms now. There's over 100.
Right.
And in my thought process, with the series that I produce and will continue to produce is, they all need content. It doesn't have to be soap opera. It doesn't have to be anything. They need things to have in their library. So my recommendation with that would be source out all of the vertical platforms, contact every single one, and then if they don't take it, they will have a recommendation for where to go, because someone will want it and need it to have in their library. So think outside of the traditional bounds of Discovery, because they would be so much more of a behemoth, and to the point about being small and nimble, hit up these platforms that are in desperate need.
Yeah, like YouTube original content, they're
Mm-hmm.
looking at doing that, but again, to get it on YouTube, to get a following, it really takes, a budget, and takes, a lot of effort to build your following, to make sure that you're attractive enough to earn a respect of a small studio or streaming platform that wants to really air your content.
Well, next docuseries, just ask me to host. We'll get it out there.
Can we take the one final question over here? I saw you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, I was just curious if you see like format innovation. Let's say like TikTok is experimenting with horizontal videos, and then we've talked about how smaller companies can be more nimble. It seems like there's been a lot of innovation on the big screen across the major SVOD streaming services, but like the vertical format seems like it's a place where they're missing out on the phone consumption. Like I live in New York, so we don't drive. There's a lot of time that you can spend with your eyes on your phone because you're not distracted by a road. But it seems like, I guess my question is, who do you think of like the big streamers is most likely to move first into like big investment in vertical as a format, just to increase the engagement on the phone when it's the best screen available?
Well, I would just point out that I think the number came out that YouTube has paid creators like $180 billion over the past 4 years. That is a big investment.
Yeah.
So
beyond like a subscription-based service.
no. YouTube is based mostly on ad revenue.
Yeah.
So they're investing. They're just doing it, a small check at a time, in a sense.
All right, I think we need to get out of here, but thank you so much for listening. Great panel here. Thank you, guys.